Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds.
Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous two-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month.
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Today on CityCast Houston, local universities are asking foreign students to get back to campus before Inauguration Day. But winter break's not even over yet for college students. So what's happening? Plus, one local sheriff is on a mission to end one of the wildest weekends near Galveston Beach. And if this cold weather wasn't enough, y'all, we have to watch out for new flesh-eating parasites. Here with me to break down those stories and more is Cron.com's trending news reporter, Faith Bugenhagen. It's Tuesday, January 7th. I'm Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Faith, what's up? How are you? Good morning.
I'm good. Everything's going really well. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing all right, a little stressed out, right? And I want to start with a literal icebreaker with you because the polar vortex is officially here, and we've already gone through 2 days worth of freezing temperatures at night. And by the way, if you're keeping tabs on our 2025 bingo card for the city of Houston, you can officially mark off wild weather. That is done. Like we already had it already. How was it for you, the prep and also just getting through it?
Yeah, it's been a little bit stressful, I will say. I think that there is some comfort in the fact that it is a light freeze as opposed to a hard freeze. I think that's obviously positive, but just making sure I have water, stocking up on groceries, I think was overall the prep that I did, but I'm just hoping that all of us Houstonians stay safe over the next couple of days.
You know, Winter Storm Uri really changed everything in terms of light freeze, hard freeze, any kind of freeze, because for me, it's almost like hurricane season, right? Where somebody would be like, hey, look, there's a hurricane or a tropical storm that's going to move in. We don't expect it to be too bad, but because of Hurricane Harvey, I just like instantly go to this frame of mind where it's like, okay, it's going to be terrible. So that's what it was for me. Like I was prepping on Sunday, running to the Home Depot, like thousands of other Houstonians, picking up the insulation, making sure I have everything. And then I've also become like the winter watchdog of my neighborhood because I'll check on my neighbors. I'm like, hey, did you turn off your backflow for your sprinkler system? Did you wrap your pipes? Are you sure the spigots are good? I am all in on this. Like, I get so worried because I never want to go through Winter Storm Uri, and seeing those images again and just the threat of water, right? Like water flowing into your house is so scary.
Yeah, it's definitely that weather PTSD that I think we've all experienced not only in hurricane seasons, but also, like you're mentioning, ever since 2021, that horrible storm hit. I think once we hear any type of unusual activity, we're ready to gear up because we've known what's happened in the past.
And we're thinking about all of our friends up in Dallas and North Texas. It looks like they're going to be getting some snow and some winter precipitation. And also the rest of the country. This polar vortex is impacting a lot of people. So stay safe out there. And also, if you're returning to school today to HISD or other districts, welcome back to school and stay warm. Make sure you bundle up if you're walking to school because it is cold. And no matter what time you're listening to this, always stay warm. All right. Faith, let's get to your big story. Let's talk about this. What do you got?
Yeah, so for today's big story, I have former Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg has announced her next move, which will be transitioning to a senior policy advisor position in Commissioner Tom Ramsey's office. So her move is internally still within Harris County operations, but it may come as a bit of a surprise for some people who were speculating maybe she was going to opt to try for a federal bench appointment. There was some talk about some other options. So it's interesting now that we are at the end of her term. District Attorney Sean Tier was recently sworn in. We're seeing her reposition herself and stay within county operations.
Yeah, that was absolutely shocking, right? Because we talked about this before and we're like, oh, federal bench for sure, something on the federal level, something big. And not to say that like this role isn't big, but it's definitely not a federal role. I don't know if this is just like a transitional year or what, but I felt like there was a deal made, right? Like when you think about politics, right? And Kim Og standing up there with Ted Cruz, we all started speculating like what deal was cut? What is she going to get? Is she going to end up working with Senator Ted Cruz? Is it going to be something even bigger? And now we find out her next move. And yeah, I think a lot of people are shocked.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, as you mentioned, she has been, for lack of a better term, cozying up with GOP leaders on the state level, like you said, Senator Ted Cruz. And now we're seeing her get close with local leaders like Commissioner Tom Ramsey, who is the only Republican on Harris
Mhm.
County Commissioner's Court. So I think it's worth noting that she is continuing to kind of signal this proximity to a party that, as of right now, she does not currently identify as. She
Yeah.
is a Democrat until otherwise noted. And I think that's something that we're going to continue to see, especially now that she is in this position with Ramsey's office.
This was the other thing that we talked about with new district attorney Sean Tier. Like, hey, Kim Og, do you think she's going to stick around locally? Is she going to make your job a little bit harder? And, he had that infamous quote from our interview where he basically said, look, I've dealt with a lot of bad people, and Kim Og, I am not scared of her. But sticking around Harris County, I wonder how that's going to play a role into what Sean Tier is doing and how she could make things a little bit harder for the district attorney's office and just in general, like what policies will she propose that could impact the Democrats, right? Because clearly she is siding with the Republicans, although, as you mentioned, not officially a title change yet. And she doesn't have to change that title, right, unless she's running for office. So definitely an interesting update to Kim Ogg's career, and we'll see what happens next. I want to get to my big story, Faith, and we are less than 2 weeks away from Donald Trump's inauguration for his second term as president. And some universities here in Houston and across Texas have a message for international students. They're saying finish up your holiday break and hurry back to campus before Trump is sworn in. For example, the official message from the University of Houston and others is that international students are, quote unquote, strongly encouraged to arrive home as soon as January 13th because of quote unquote immigration related uncertainties. Now, for those of you that may have forgotten or you weren't around for the first Trump presidency, the first time he took office, he put in a Muslim travel ban that impacted a lot of international students, as well as many other families and working professionals in the Houston area. And this time he's called for revoking international student visas of students he considers anti-American or anti-Semitic. Faith, there's a lot to unpack here. And of course, I have some thoughts here as a Muslim man, but I want to get your thoughts first. What do you think about this?
I think it's unfortunate that students are having to worry about anything other than their education. These are college students. So I think it's important that they have an environment that is supportive of their learning and their education. And I think what's also very important to note is that these students are going on to be the doctors, the attorneys, the professionals, the employees in the workforce of our country. And
Mm-hmm.
President elect Donald Trump always talks about how pro business he is. He's obviously a businessman given his background. So you would think that his policies and his practices would align with that priority. And I'm not sure if this aligns with that priority. And I think that it's just, again, unfortunate, especially given how many international students we have in this country, especially in Houston area universities, that this is something that they're kind of having to look
Mm-hmm.
out for. But I think we'll have to see the implementation of this as well, because there's a lot of policy talk, there's a lot of practice talk, but it's like, is that going to occur and what will that look like moving forward?
Yeah. The one thing about President-elect Trump, he is, as you mentioned, like he's all about business. And this move kind of backs that, right? Because when immigrants can help your business, then it's okay. And the Trump administration will back H-1B visas, right? And we've seen that riff. We talked about it last week as well. That's happening within the Republican Party about H-1B visas. And when those immigrants are directly helping your business, it's cool. But when the students who aren't directly impacting your business right now, you can revoke their visas and come off as Islamophobia, right? Like under those kind of terms and guises. So it's like he's being consistent with it at least, but it is frustrating to hear like all of these students, how this next month or 2 months, or of course the next 4 years, like how is this going to impact them and their fear of just being able to leave the country and come back lawfully, by the way, because they have these visas, but it's so quick that they could just revoke it. And as you mentioned, this is such a big deal for us locally because Texas is one of the 3 most popular states for international students. By the way, overall, United States has over 1 million students from other countries. And just at U of H, there are more than 5,000 international students, or 10% of the total population. And there are more at Rice as well. So, this is something that we're watching out for, and it's impacting our local community for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. International students are also typically non-immigrant F1 or J1 visas, which allow them to live and study in the country around their core states. Also, it's worth noting that one famous Trump supporter who was an international student is Elon Musk, who left South Africa for Stanford on a J1 visa. The rest, they say, is history.
Life and Death on the Border 1910 to 1920 is now on view at Holocaust Museum Houston from January 24th to May 25th. This groundbreaking exhibition is produced by the Bullock Texas State History Museum in collaboration with Refusing to Forget, and it explores a decade of hardship, conflict, and state-sanctioned violence along the Texas border that threatened to destroy a community. But this decade also led to a cultural renaissance along the border and beyond, and it inspired the Mexican-American Civil Rights Movement. Life and Death on the Border 1910 to 1920 will be on view in Holocaust Museum Houston's Joseph and Edith Mintzberg Gallery, January 24th through May 25th. Admission is always free for ages 18 and under and college students with a valid school ID, and it's also free to everyone Thursdays from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. Learn more at hmh.org/lifeanddeath. The Museum of Fine Arts Houston presents Living with the Gods, Arts, Beliefs, and People. To celebrate its centennial, the museum has organized a once-in-a-lifetime exhibition that features extraordinary objects made by artists to communicate with their gods. Living with the Gods represents a vast array of religions and beliefs, with art created across cultures and across thousands of years. The 200 objects demonstrate the astonishing quality that artists have achieved when driven by passion and faith. Living with the Gods is on view from October 27th through January 20th, 2025. Visit mfah.org/livingwiththegods to learn more. That's mfah.org/livingwiththegods. All right, Faith, it is time for lightning round. I'm going to rip through 3 stories and get your thoughts on these, and of course, put mine in there as well. And first one, look, I know Fort Bend is growing, and I already have too many neighbors, but I'm about to add a lot more neighbors here in Fort Bend because there are 5 developments coming to the Sugar Land, Richmond, and Rosenberg areas that are going to add thousands of homes. One of them is right down the road in Richmond called Austin Point, that will have a grand opening this summer. And once it's fully built out, they are going to add about 50,000 new residents. What is happening here? Like, Houston suburbs are growing and Fort Bend is one of the more popular destinations. Is this going to be more affordable housing? How is this going to impact housing in Houston? Are more people going to move out here? This is just wild.
It is wild. I think the buildup of the suburbs in general has been fascinating to see. The one thing I will note is I did a story probably about 2 years ago now on the Magnolia area. And the one thing I constantly worry about, given that story, is just having the supplies needed for the growth, water supply, all that infrastructure. I feel like is something that comes up a lot when it does come to these new
Hmm.
builds. So I'm hoping that they're all factoring that in. But this is good news overall because it means more people are coming to Texas, more people are settling into the suburbs, and that's good for Texas and for Fort Bend specifically. But just hoping that there are those resources to serve the
Yeah.
growth in the population.
I'm so glad you brought up resources. And if you have a bingo card of things Raheel brings up on the show all the time, it's Fort Bend ISD, right? Because it impacts me. I have a daughter who goes to Fort Bend ISD. We'll have a second daughter going there as well. We moved out here in 2014, my wife and I, and we moved here because of the space, because of the suburb feeling of having a lot of room, having the farms near us. Like that was a big attraction for us here in Richmond, Rosenberg. And now it's not even a suburb anymore, right? Like I look at my neighborhood, there are thousands of homes. Right down the street, there's another neighborhood called Aliana, which has about 4,000 single family homes. And you're going to add in Austin Point, which is 50,000 new people. It's not a suburb anymore. This is just another city. And one of the big things is in our neighborhood, there are thousands of homes being built and there are way too many students in our elementary school. And will Fort Bend ISD be able to keep up and build a new elementary school, even though we as citizens said, yes, here's a bond that has passed, build this new elementary school. And they're like, well, actually, we don't have the money for it. So we're not going to build that. Like, how is the education demand going to keep up as well? And those resources, it's going to be interesting to see how the city, the ISD, how local businesses are going to keep up with this demand and this population boom.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep track of because, like you're saying, it does not look like it did years ago. And I'm
Mhm.
sure that in the years to come, it's going to continue on this trend.
All right, Faith, we're going to take a step back and rewind here for a second because I've got some numbers from 2024. The number of stolen cars in Houston dropped in 2024 for the first time in 5 years. Just over 15,000 cars were stolen in Houston, which is down from 19,000 in 2023. Now, Faith, can you guess the most stolen vehicle in Houston?
Oh, I don't know. I would say maybe like a Honda.
That's not a bad guess. The Honda Accord came in at number 10, but the number one most stolen car was the Chevy Silverado Classic Hybrid in the 1500, 2500, and 3500 series. I have no idea what that means. But for the last 3 years, that has been the most stolen car slash truck in the Houston area. I was with you. Like, I'm thinking Honda, Toyota, Kia, Hyundai. Remember, they had that issue where they were really easy to steal. Like, people could just go in and with a USB, they could steal a car. They have since updated the security flaw in those cars in the Hyundai and Kia. But yeah, I thought it was going to be that. But I was shocked that it was a Chevy Silverado. I guess just because there's more of those on the roads.
It poses a lot of questions in my mind because those are large vehicles and you'd think they'd aim for small vehicles if they're stealing them.
Hey, if you can steal it, you steal it, I guess. I have no idea. By the way, do you have any stories about stolen cars?
I do, unfortunately. Luckily, my car, whose name is Waverly, shout out. He's a little ruby red Subaru. I love him. Luckily, he has not been stolen from my apartment complex. However, there are other cars that have been completely stolen. I
What?
don't know how. I don't know if there's residents in the building that are accidentally leaving them unlocked. I have no idea how this is occurring, but that's happening in my apartment complex. I'm hearing anecdotally it's happening in other apartment complexes. And also, I think something that's frequently come up are tires, just entire four set of tires being taken from cars in my apartment complex.
Yeah.
Like a couple of my neighbors next to me, I just came out one day and their cars were tireless. And I was like, what in the world is going on?
Wow, all tires stolen. Now, if I remember correctly, and I'm pretty sure our recurring guest, Shannon Ryan, ABC 13 reporter, it happened to her as well. So, yeah, it's wild out there.
No, tires are so expensive. Cars are obviously so expensive. And I feel for her and all the others that have to navigate that because being carless in Houston is not an easy feat. And
Mm-mm.
making up for those expenses is not an easy feat.
It is not easy. All right. Speaking of cars, AKA Jeeps, I have a story here for you. A big update. If you are a fan of the Go Topless weekend, AKA Jeep weekend on Bolivar Peninsula, then you might have just enjoyed your last gathering last summer because New Galveston County Sheriff Jimmy Fullen has made it his goal to end the quote unquote free for all weekend that brings nearly 100,000 people to both Galveston Island and Bolivar Peninsula. In the last couple of years, it's become so wild with fights, shootings, and sexual assault that many businesses, by the way, are just like, we're done. We don't want to be open. They just shut down for that weekend because the crowds are so unruly. Faith, what are your thoughts on this one?
The amount of arrest and criminal charges filed that were reported in that Houston public media story was insane. There were a lot of arrests made, nearly 400 from that event, which I think it makes complete sense as to why the sheriff is trying to
Mhm.
reevaluate that. However, what I will note is he is newly elected, so it may be the best move for public safety, but maybe public popularity if he's concerned about, the voters. That may be a move that's interesting because I'm sure
Yeah.
people love coming out to this event, but I think in terms of his responsibilities for public safety, it's definitely the right move.
Yeah, I think the people who voted him in, they are kind of done with this event because you think about 100,000 people gathering on the island. I'm going to assume a lot of them are not from there and they're just coming there to party. And if you haven't seen the videos on Bolivar Peninsula, there's the most popular beach, there's Crystal Beach, and you can drive up and down the beach, like literally take your car right into the water if you want. And there are thousands of Jeeps just lined up and there's only one way in, one way out, it seems like, right? So the traffic is wild on the beach. People are getting unruly. I remember when the event first started because I have friends who live on Crystal Beach during the summer, and it was like a fun little gathering. It was cool. There was a bunch of Jeeps, and now it has become just the wildest party that, there's not enough cops, it seems like, to help out and make sure things don't go south. And that's why Jimmy Fullen's like, enough of this. Until we figure this out, we're canceling this. And hey, I'm sure the locals are loving that call.
I was going to say, especially you bringing up the concerns and perspective of the residents, I can imagine how frustrating it is to have all these people come into the area and cause a ruckus and then
Yeah.
just scoot out. I'm sure that's very frustrating. So I think it will be interesting to see if he's able to get it through because
Yeah.
I'm almost positive that the story noted the commissioner's court is going to have to work with the sheriff to get that approved.
And it's not an official event, like the city doesn't put it on. It's a gathering, right? Like it starts with just an organic social media post and hey, we're all going to meet up here. And it is a public beach at the end of the day. So there are some concerns there how he's going to get this done, but we'll be watching this one and see what he actually does with this and if they can actually cancel Go Topless Weekend, which is such a big, big event locally for Bolivar and Galveston Island.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. The new year brings new health goals and wealth goals. Protecting your identity is an important step. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, LifeLock's restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed or your money back. Resolve to make identity health and wealth part of your New Year's goals with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
It's Tuesday, so that means we get to do only in H-Town stories that are so wild, so wacky, and sometimes so awesome because we're H-Town, right? Faith, you know the drill, so you started off. What do you got for me?
Only in H-Town would a police officer be seriously injured trying to keep a suspect on the scene of an event basically, this story comes out of a little east of us in Beaumont, and two women were acting up in Little Woodrow's parking
Oh my
lot of
gosh.
all places. So that's a familiar staple for us Houstonians because there's a couple locations across our city. And at this one in Beaumont, there was a disturbance reported. Police were called, and a Beaumont police officer ended up going to the scene while he tried to stop a female suspect from driving off in a car. He unfortunately fell off the car while the female suspect sped away.
So like he jumped on the car and
Yes, he
oh
did.
my gosh.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
And this clip of the whole incident was recorded and it went viral on social media, as most things do. And
oh.
a bunch of Houstonians were like, what is going on? Unfortunately, the officer was seriously injured. He had a head injury, but he is in stable condition at one of the local hospitals. And the suspects were eventually caught. But it just involves cars and causing chaos, and that's very Houston.
I just want to say it's not worth it, y'all. Like, what are y'all doing? This is so frustrating to see now. Like, I'm watching the video right now, and you just see the suspects. Like, all you have to do is just stop and just let the officer deal with it, right? Like, if you're not in the wrong, then you'd be cleared. That's fine. And if you are causing a ruckus, guess what? You did it. This is on you. Why? It's not worth it. And now somebody has been seriously hurt. You're going to have charges filed on you, right? Like that is going to be thing. It's going to be on your record. It is not worth it. Like, what are we doing? This is so sad, and also just a sad reality of only in H-Town, like our car-centric culture, this is what happens. And also, please stop getting so drunk, y'all, where you can't listen to an officer. What are we doing? Come on. This is so bad.
Exactly. I feel like cars, intoxication, they never blend well for obvious reasons. And this is not by any means a laughing matter, especially the injury. However, I do want to note that there were some social media users comparing it to Paul Blart, if you're familiar with that movie.
Oh no, not the mall cop.
It was an interesting reference to make, is what I will say, but it is not a laughing matter.
And that's the thing with social media. Like, this officer is doing his job, right? And we're going to make jokes about this. Like, that's not funny. That is not funny to me at all. All right, Faith, I'm going to end things off with my story for Only in H-Town. And this is only in H-Town in all of Texas that we have to deal with a freeze and now the threat of a flesh-eating parasite called the New World Screwworm, which is an invasive fly whose parasitic larvae burrow into living animals. And they were just detected in a checkpoint in southern Mexico. And they've been flying north, which is tracking to guess where, Faith? Right here in Texas. Are you familiar with the New World Screwworm?
I did hear about these pests, and I'm not excited because we have enough creepy crawlers around here, some of which I just look at and I'm like, what the heck are those even? So I'm not excited to hear this news. I don't think anybody is, but hopefully they just stay in the wild where they're supposed to be and leave us alone in the city.
Yeah, that'd be great because they've been eradicated in the U.S. since 1966 because of efforts by federal and state officials. But Texas Parks and Wildlife Department are asking residents to be on the lookout. Now, they don't pose a major threat to humans, but officials are asking, people to be on the lookout for infected animals and livestock because New World Screwworm, which sounds like, I don't know, sounds like a wrestling promotion, by the way. I don't know, or a rap group. I don't know. The flies can lay up to 300 eggs at a time and may lay up to 3,000 during a single lifespan. Now, officials haven't said if this parasite is killing off animals or if it's just impacting them right now. So we'll kind of keep you up to date on this as we find out more as well, because just the threat of this has officials on edge. All right. That's going to be your lasting memory of this episode is the parasite. Ugh.
Yeah, no parasites. I'm glad that they don't present a threat to humans, and I did know that about them, but I just don't think it's good that a species that was eradicated is coming back. I don't think that's good news. So hopefully it will go away, and hopefully we'll be on the lookout to see if animals and livestock are affected by that.
Yeah, I'm totally good with it. Maybe New World Screwworm can be our tag team name. I don't know. That just sounds pretty gnarly. Faith, that was so much fun. Thank you so much for joining me, and stay warm out there, okay?
I will, and you do the same. Thank you as always, Raheel. I appreciate it.
That was Faith Bugenhagen. You can check out all of her work with the link in our show notes, and we also dropped the links to all of the stories from today's episode there as well. Now, if you're new to CityCast Houston, please hit the subscribe button and then text this episode to 3 friends who also hate this cold weather like me and can't wait for those sunny days to return. Please rate and review the podcast as well, since it's one of the best ways we can bring the show to more people in Houston. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. That will do it for today. I'm Raheel Ramzanali. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new. Is irritated or depressed behavior, loss of appetite, head shaking, smell of decaying fish. Oh, this is just getting beautiful. Presence of maggots and isolation from other animals or people. Yeah, I don't know if I want to read that on.
No.